Greetings from Crossroads Church in Aransas Pass, Texas. As humans, we have breath, life, willpower, emotions, good days, bad days, strengths, and yes, sometimes weaknesses. But no matter where you are in life, the highs and lows, or how much progress is being made, we encourage you to take some time with us in watching this next video. Take care.
It's going to be a massive disappointment. Now, every single one of you came here this morning to hear me preach. I'm not going to do it. So anyway, we have some special guests here since it is Mother's Day. Yeah, I will in just a second. I know what I'm doing here. No, hang on. No. Everybody keep your seats. Now, I got a plan here. So, I know it's Mother's Day, but I'm still the boss, okay? Talking to my daughter, so that's kind of like, I'm not really sure. So anyway, great to see all of you guys. So what I did this time is, we've done this several times for our services when we would have special guests. But we have 4 special ladies that they're not guests. They're part of our home church, and the reason why I wanted Victoria to wait, I'm going to introduce them one at a time. We're going to greet them like the rock stars that they are. Now look, you say, well, no, we're only supposed to worship, but we're not worshiping them, but we're just showing our appreciation to them for being awesome women and their families in our church. So obviously, we got to recognize Victoria Daughtry. Round of applause. All right. What in the world did I do with my... I think I erased all the questions here. I think I have it on my phone, hopefully. But no, this is going to be a very short. Anyway, let's have a round of applause for Jackie Cheney. Yeah, that means come on up here, Sister Jackie. She didn't want the applause to stop. Just keep on. Make a paper copy, I sometimes will delete things off my device. So the whole plan, I just deleted it. So I have no idea how I did that. Next, we have Donna Leister. Okay. I don't know. It'd be going so much smoother. And Miss Sister Jerry Henderson. Where is Jerry at? All right. So these are really some important ladies. So ladies, you each have a microphone, and if you don't, some of you don't handle the microphone, put it on mute, and you want to say something unkind, put it on mute. And then when we ask you a question, you can put it on mic. So anyway, what I wanted to do instead of me sharing my expertise on what it's like to be a godly mother, I asked these ladies to help us out, and this is a day that we want to honor the women in our church and honor the ladies, and also just a couple of words of encouragement I know that they'll have for the moms, the ladies in our church. So why don't we do this? I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and just a little biography. Tell us your life story in about 15, 20, 30 seconds. So, Miss Jackie, you're like the star here. Why don't you?
Well, let's see, I had 2 children, and I was a school teacher a million years in Aransas Pass and in the Rio Grande Valley. And I love children. And I have, 6 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. So I'm very blessed.
My name is Jerry. I've been a part of this church for like 9 years. I am a mom. I have 2 biological children, and I have 2 bonus children and 5 grandchildren. I was a librarian. You probably wouldn't know that because I talk a lot. But I was a librarian for like 27 years. I loved education. I love children. But now I am adults. So I'm in a new learning process. So
My name is Donna. I've been married for 45 years.
What?
Whoop, whoop.
The same guy?
Yeah, same guy.
Some of us, it takes 2 or 3 before we get to 45 years.
Well, you know, he works away from home 3 weeks out of the month. Secret to the great relationship.
Oh, my God.
I have 2 children, and I have 5 grandchildren and 1 on the way.
Hello, my name is Victoria. I have been married for 16 years. It's not 45. I have 4 children. I am a stay-at-home mom, and I homeschool. And he did not tell us we were going to have to answer this question, so we were not prepared for this. And I have grown up in this church. I've been in this church since before I was even born. And so I have literally been here in womb and out of womb. And so I've been here a very long time. My entire life, yes. My entire 25 years of living. Why are y'all laughing so hard?
Who's she related to? Well, it is, it's such a great honor to be with these ladies. They are just absolutely amazing. Okay, that concludes the service. That was, but obviously, many times we, especially us guys, we think we kind of know it all. We kind of got it all figured out. And how many times have you wives asked your husband, "Are you listening?" You ever ask your husband that? Us guys, it's not a rude thing. It's just our DNA. We're wired to hear certain things, like, "Honey, dinner's ready." We hear that, or "Where do you want to go to eat?" Or "Honey, can you take out the trash?" Somehow that our ears just doesn't work, in situations like that. But I thought, what a blessing we have in our church, and to have these ladies be able to share some things. So I have some questions for them. I did send them the questions at a time. We'll try to go with the script. If I don't quit, you're deleting it off my tablet here. So I wanted to start with Jackie and just kind of share whatever you'd like to share. So she mentioned she was a teacher. And so how many years were you and Pete together?
I think almost 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so her and her husband Pete, and he was a special guy, and then one day he said, "Nah, I have to go home and be with the Lord." So he's up there waiting for us, for those of us that make it. Let me just put it that way. And so her and Pete, just tremendous blessing, and so she's been with us all these years. So think back to the earlier years in your life, because you and I are about the same age, but some of these young guys don't get this. Some of these young ladies, they don't realize how good that they have it. What was, like for your mom, for instance, and of course none of us, maybe some here knew your mom, I never did, but guys, focus over here. I'm trying to, yeah. So what was daily life like for your mom back when you were growing up?
Well, I said to the other girls, y'all didn't make notes, but I'm a school teacher. Anyway, well, y'all probably known because you've seen movies, but my mom, I mean, she didn't have a clothes dryer, she spent her life, it seemed like, doing housework. She made every meal, she packed our school lunches, my dad's lunch, she spent a whole day ironing clothes. I hardly know where my iron is, but she did it amazingly. Oh, she did it with a skip in her step, which would really embarrass me sometime. When I was 11 or 12, she just had a skip in her step, and she just was always full of joy and singing as she did all that stuff. And let's see, so she didn't have modern conveniences. She sewed everything I wore, even made my wedding dress. She had a servant's heart, from my earliest memories. You know, she was a Girl Scout leader, and all the neighborhood kids, when we lived in Corpus, were at our house. She made cookies for us. She served on the PTA when we moved over here. She whipped out letters if there was an injustice or if there needed to be a traffic light in an intersection where there had been some people killed. You know, she was T90, but just full of energy and life, and such a sweet spirit. And she organized our family reunions, and then she was church secretary for like 30 years. So I just had a little T90 whirlwind of a mother.
So what was the role of faith in your family growing up?
Well, you know, my spiritual values were not just taught, but they were caught. I mean, that's just what it was kind of a quiet faith. Both my mom and dad had. Faithful to church, faithful to doing the work of the Lord in the community, in our church, you know. But it was a quiet faith. It was just understood, like I know Pastor said this. There was no negotiation whether you were going to church on Wednesday night, Sunday morning, and Sunday night. You know, it was just a quiet, consistent faith, and also, well, I don't know if this is the role of faith, but she in particular did not tolerate. I had a tendency to come home and say, poor little this person, or I saw a house that it looks like they need me to make a pie, and she kind of was intolerant of the poor little me thing, and kind of would scold me because she grew up an orphan almost and just was pushed around because her mother died when she was 4, and she just expected you to rise up and get her done, you know.
So I was going to ask you, how many times did you get a spanking growing up? I didn't tell you I was going to ask that, did I?
I don't think I really ever did.
That doesn't surprise me at all. All right. Well, let's go to the other end of the platform here, and so Victoria's. She mentioned she's a stay-at-home mom, and they have an incredibly busy schedule. I think things are getting. People are moving at such a faster pace. So many things. So, how do you manage your schedule with Kyle's work and your homeschooling, and how do you keep your sanity?
I don't. Seriously, I don't. No, I'm just kidding. That's very hard. I wish I could say something so profound, and sometimes it's just as simple as like, you just have to. You just have to do it. What other choice do you have? You don't have a choice. You have to. And especially when, homeschooling was not something that I have always wanted to do. I didn't know any homeschooling families growing up. We went to a very small little private school, which I guess, now that I look back on it, could literally be like a homeschool co-op, kind of. It was so tiny. And so that was really never on my radar. And then we had Presley, and just every year that she kind of got older and started inching closer to going to kindergarten, Kyle, my husband, was like, do you think you want to try it out? And I was like, not really. I don't know if I'd be good at it. I don't know if I would, teach them well. And now I can't imagine not doing it. And so when it's something that you choose to do, you just have to make the sacrifices to make it work. And so talking about like with Kyle's work schedule, he works shift work, and so he switches from days to nights. And so for us, that's not anything new. Before we were even married, that's what he's always done. So going into having kids and into this marriage, I knew that is what, my life was going to look like. And so I won't say it's not difficult sometimes, because when he is working a lot, especially when you're with your kids 24/7, and you can't escape them sometimes. It does get hard, and sometimes you do kind of feel like you're on your own. But yeah, it's just kind of finding something that works for your family, especially like having social media now and having so many people, like even if you're homeschooling or doing anything, you can find other families online that are doing the same thing, and they paint this picture that things are perfect and they've got it all together, and the reality is nobody has it all together. And what works for my family is not going to work for your family, because we're in two completely different areas of our life, and even if it's another homeschool family, we're different people, and our children are different people. And so for me personally, it was just kind of having to make a list of what is most important in my life right now, and trying to say no to the other things, which is very hard for me. So I'm still learning to do those things. I don't think it's something you just learn and then you're just perfect at it. We're always growing, and we're always having to adapt, because seasons change, people change, and situations change. So,
A lot of times in life we get curveballs and things that happen. And if you, like for instance, we did an exercise this morning, and what do you think your life's going to be in 15, 20 years from now? Well, I'll be with Jesus. I don't know about the rest of you folks. I'll be with Jesus, 20 years probably. But if you're young enough and you have expectancy to live that long, and you just kind of drew a picture of what your life would look like, I'm sure you'd put mainly good things. You'd mainly put good things. Thought the Lord was calling. You'd mainly put good things on there. But very few of us factor in just like soul-crushing, trials or difficulties that we go through. So I'd asked Jerry. Jerry had lost her first husband a few years back, and I just wanted her to give us a short testimony of the grace of God and how God helped her get through that time.
My girls were young, I guess. Katie, I think, was 4 when her dad started chemo, so that was our life from the time, right? So she was 8, and then my daughter was 13 when their dad died. And their dad was very much involved in their life, very much a part of, and very much a disciplinarian, very structured. He could snap his fingers, and the girls would immediately hear that, and they would stop, and they would come. But I had to learn to be the mom, the single mom, to do everything. My relationship with God was very strong. His relationship with God was very strong. So that was the first thing, is that sustaining, knowing, no matter how hard it was, that God was going to get me through, because at night, that was what was there. So that was first and foremost. But I've also been blessed with an amazing family. My family, my mom and my stepmom worked at the same restaurant. My dad and my mom were friends. My mom and my aunt. So that's the kind of family dynamic that I grew up in. I didn't know any different. That was just, so my family was there. Phyllis would come, and she would help me do things that I didn't know how to do on my own. She was there for me. I have another sister, and I had a brother. So my family dynamic was very good. They were there all the time. I had a great church family. They were very strong. They were holidays, birthdays, things to make sure that I was never by myself. So I had always checking on me. I had this amazing lady, because I worked, and I was blessed to be able to work and be with my kids, but I had this amazing lady named Jackie Cheney who would come and clean my house while I worked. She would fold my clothes and make my bed and all those things so that I wouldn't have to work and do all this. I had Pete Cheney, who would come and clean my gutters. and gripe when he would put my Christmas lights up. Yeah, he would gripe. So I had a great dynamic, I guess, of people, of God first, but people that always made sure that my girls and I were okay, and that's that's what got me through.
So Donna had already mentioned how that her husband being a tugboat captain probably saved their marriage or whatever. But outside of that, talk a little bit about that, because he has gone a lot. So that I know that's been a real challenge at times.
Yes, so we've been married 45 years this November, and out of those 45 years, he has been on the boat for 43 of those years. So you talk about challenging. It is like being a single parent. And then, of course, on his side, he's sacrificed so much. Yes, it's like me being a single parent, but at the same time, he misses birthdays. He misses Christmases. He's missed so much. And we had talked about him changing careers, but for him, he's been on the boats so long that that's his life. It's what he knows. He's got his master's license in it, and to just up and change careers, it just didn't make sense. But it was very hard on him, as well as being hard on myself, because he misses a lot of games growing up for the kids. He missed tons of competitions and stuff that Randa was involved in. TJ went to state, in soccer. For the state championship, he missed that as well. There's just a lot of stuff that he missed growing up with the kids. And as far as like coming home, when he come home, it's like you try to combine a whole month in a week. So it's very hard to catch up with everything in 1 week. So it was just very challenging.
So, Ms. Jackie, you have seniority on this group of ladies here. So how have you observed, like, the role of mother change? What are some differences, some things that you see that have changed, some that have stayed the same? Because obviously you're a history major.
Well, basically, I don't think the role has changed. I mean, yes, it's a different. We have food at our fingertips. We have appliances that help us take care of floors and everything, that mothers in the past didn't have. But the role, a mother's heart just hasn't changed. I mean, basically, the role is to nurture, to lead by example, and so I don't see a great change, But then it's easy for me to say that because I had such a precious mom, and I guess not everyone can say that, Some people have a harder time, but yeah. My mother would have loved things like the internet, which help us so much. There's just, but basically, yeah, a mom's heart is a mom's heart. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Victoria has an upbringing very, very similar to mine. And really, I think the timing was almost identical. My dad was not a pastor when I was growing up, and I wasn't a pastor when she was growing up. But she kind of confronts sort of the same challenges I had, being that your dad is the pastor and you're here, and you love Jesus. You can put up with your dad, and you love Jesus, so you're trying to figure out what God's plan is. So I had a question for her. How do you balance that as far as like the ministry God's called you to? Obviously, you've talked about the fact that you homeschool, your husband is working shift work. So basically, her back hurts from carrying that whole family all the time. You know what I'm saying? And so how do you try to find balance, and how do you find God's plan for you? Because obviously to really find your yes, you have to be able to say no to things. And as a pastor, I'm really huge on that. Somebody says, I'm stressed out, take a break. Well, we won't have that ministry for a while. Then we won't have it for a while. It's just not worth people being, so, but I do try to keep her stressed out. So talk about
He
that.
doesn't try. He does a very good job of keeping me stressed out all the time. So like he said, so I didn't grow up with him being a pastor, but I did grow up with my grandfather being a pastor. And if you knew my grandfather and had to work under him at all, you know it was a good thing, but it could be challenging. And then obviously as I've become an adult, my dad has been a pastor. So being a preacher's kid or a pastor's kid and grandchild, sometimes it can turn into like a family business, whereas especially in a smaller church, if something needs to get done, you are voluntold, this is now what you are doing. Good luck. You have been promoted to toilet scrubber at 12 years old. We need you to run the projector. We need you to do all these things. And so growing up in that environment teaches you obviously to serve, and it's not a bad thing, but sometimes it can also teach you to be too involved and not teach you how to say no, because especially when it's a smaller church, you're like, well, this needs to be done, so you just do it. We don't have the volunteers to do it. We don't have the people right now, so you just like step in that role. And so sometimes for me personally, as I got older, it was definitely a little bit harder to start taking a step back. So if I told you what I do in this church, the list is still very, very long. But I have, in my 20s, especially when I had just started having kids, it was very difficult for me because I was so used to not having children. You know, me and Kyle were married for a while before we had kids, and so we had a lot of freedom to just do things and be involved. And then you have your first child, and it is a very jarring experience because now you're taking care of this little person and you've never done it before. And so for me personally, I kind of started to struggle to find the balance of, am I doing too much? Am I not doing enough? And then, you know, we added in our son, and then it just got even more difficult. Going from no kids to 1 kid was hard, but going from 1 to 2 kids was very difficult for me personally. It was, you know, crazy. And then talking about like Kyle with his schedule and being gone a lot, and then still trying to feel like I had to be involved in a lot of ministries in the church was very difficult. And it took a lot of things happening and a lot of growing and a lot of things happening to me personally in my 30s to realize that, like he said, sometimes the best thing you can do is say no, and to take a step back and to kind of get your priorities, you know, in order. And for me, like where my kids are right now, like my oldest, she's 12, she just turned 12, and then my son's about to turn 10, and then my little ones are still like little, they're not in school yet. And homeschooling right now for me, and them being the age that they are, you know, when they're little, you can kind of screw up because they're not going to remember, but when they're older, they can tell on you. And so if you want to know anything, that any way I mess up, don't ask Presley, she probably won't tell you, but if you ask Ryder, he'll tell you everything. You don't even have to bribe him. He'll tell you everything. And so for me at this point, that is kind of like, that's my ministry, is being at home with them, especially the age that my oldest ones are at. They're starting to form like the opinions on who they are. And so trying to navigate who God says that they are and teach them those things, and then also teach them how to do math. And algebra and all these things. It's a lot of stuff. And so if you're involved in church and in ministry, like I said before, things change. And I think sometimes we get so focused on like the ministry in the church that we forget that our families are like our first ministry, and especially our children, because they are with us like the most out of, like for me, my kids are with me more than they're with like anybody else. And so sometimes like taking a step back from certain things in the church is necessary to really be like with your first calling, which for me is my children.
So Jerry's at an interesting stage in her life. I'm a little bit older than her, and every year she gets a little bit older, but she'll never catch me. So But the stage that she's at, so she has kids that have transitioned into being young adults. And then that presents, I was talking to a young couple the other day. There was a chamber like breakfast at Butter Churn, and one of the guys, I think he works for Weather Service or something. It was on hurricanes, and he was standing there. He kind of a young guy and his wife, and they had their first baby. And when you have your first baby, you're so happy. Like Victoria said, by the time you get to 2 or 3, you're wearing the battle scars of, trying to raise those kids. And you understand the role when they're little, but then as they start getting older, and then you're sort of like, your relationship sort of changes as they become adults. So I asked Jerry maybe to talk about the question I asked: How do you know, like with your adult kids, how do you know how to help and when to step in and help and when to? Now I tell you, men would answer this differently, but women are more like Jesus. So I think I want her to answer, because I know as guys we love that tough love, but for moms it's a little bit different. So talk about that relationship, like with your adult kids, and how do you know when to step in, when to take a step back, and how do you manage that?
Well, it's definitely something that I'm learning. I've learned a lot in the last couple of years because I'm a nurturer. That's just my nature. And when their dad died, they grew up, and I was wanting to make sure that they had everything they needed, that I was always going to be there. If something went wrong, I was going to fix it. So that's kind of been my life. And then they became adults, and it's a little harder. The last couple of years, God has really been teaching me to let them get spiritual legs. And that's the term it's only the term I can think of, is because they have to walk on their own. Because I told my daughter, I'm 65, I'm not always going to be here. I'm healthy, can get hit by a bus, I can have a motorcycle wreck, whatever, you have to learn to do some of these things. And so so this definitely has been a challenge for me. Probably one of the hardest challenges that I've had in a long time is learning to let them struggle, because no parent wants to see your kids struggle. I don't care, your heart, my heart would hurt. So God has been teaching me through a situation where I couldn't fix something. Something came up, and I thought, God, I can't fix this for her. I really can't. And I remember God telling me one time, he said, I love her more than you do. And I thought, wow. I knew it, but it was like, wow. And then he said, and if I love her more than you, I can take better care of her than you. And that was a starting point for me having to learn to back away and say, okay, you got to do this. I can pray for you, and I do. So I listened to God when I'm working on being a Mary, not a Martha, all the time. That's helping. So I listen, and I pray, and God has been showing me they have to do this. I've got them covered. My hand is never going to be away from them. And I pray for my kids every day. Every day I pray for my kids. I cover them with the blood. I plead the blood of Jesus over them. And I listen. And then I've had to learn to let God help them. And they have struggled. And it's been hard. I've spent a lot of time, my back porch, crying, praying and crying, because what they were going through was really hard. But God said, I got this. And so it's been a process for me. It's something that I'm still learning, especially over the last couple of years, is just to listen, ask for God's wisdom. And God, how do you want me to help them? I want you to be quiet. Is what he tells me. I want you to shut up. This is it's not yours to fix. They have to do this. You have to pray for them and let them pray and figure it out. And I've seen them grow. I've seen them become moms that, they're amazing, they're strong, and they're survivors. And if I were to be gone today, they'd be okay, because they've got that foundation of Christ. They'd be okay, and that's what I'm learning.
So Donna's been in a very unique situation for a while. We are all at one point were children, and we had the parent-child dynamic, and then at some point it changes. And I can distinctly remember having this conversation with my parents as they were getting older and having a harder time living on their own. And I was spending more and more time down there, which I was so honored and happy to do. But we would have these little arguments about, don't put those dishes in the dishwasher. You know, my mom would tell me stuff like that. And I finally had to sit mom and dad down and say, look, there's a new sheriff in town. It's me. So you guys are just going to, I know this, we got to reverse the roles, but, you know. And so Donna has sort of been in that situation, a very unique situation. She doesn't have small kids, but so talk a little bit about the situation you've been in the past few years where now you've been the primary caregiver for parents and the older generation.
Well, yes, I'm on my third parent for caregiving, and let me just say, caregiving is one of the hardest jobs out there. It really is. My heart goes out to every caregiver because it is very challenging. With the first one was my husband's mother and my mother-in-law, and I took care of her solely. She was on hospice, and that was very challenging. I honestly went into it, didn't know how to handle it. If it wasn't for people praying for me, I probably wouldn't have gotten through it. But my one word of advice for anyone that goes into caregiving is pray. Pray, 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 because it is very challenging. My second one was my dad, and he was on hospice as well. With my mother-in-law, she grew up in the church and knew the Lord, but my dad didn't grow up in the church, and he didn't know the Lord. So my primary thing with my dad was not only taking care of him, but his salvation. And I don't know if you've ever had to witness to a relative, but it is very hard, especially to a parent, because you have a certain amount of respect for them and their beliefs and what they've instilled on you growing up. And for me, just a little bit of a background, I was never forced to come to church. My parents, my mom loved the Lord, but she never went to church. And I didn't live with my mom, I lived with my dad. My dad never forced me to go to church, but the funny thing is that my husband's grandparents would come and pick me up and bring me to church on Sunday and on Wednesday. So I did grow up in the church, but I wasn't forced to be here. So that being said, with my dad, I grew up having a love for the Lord. I was filled with the Holy Spirit at 12 years old at back in the day when it was called a CA rally over in Beeville, if any of you know what those are. I was filled with the Holy Spirit back then. And then when it came to my dad, I prayed often because he had such a anger in him and unforgiveness when my mother left him at a very young age. I was only 3 years old when they separated. But all those years, he never remarried, never had like a steady girlfriend or anything that he took into his life. So I prayed about it and asked God, how do I approach him? How do I talk to Dad about salvation? And it was very clear to me when I was praying one night. He says, I want you to go in there and I want you to be bold. You go in there and you tell him that, Dad, if you don't get your heart right with Jesus, you're going one or two places. You're either going to heaven or you're going to go burn in hell. And I was like, wait a minute. Am I really hearing you right, Lord? Do you want me to tell my dad he's going to go burn in hell? And I'm telling you, the Holy Spirit said, you go in there and you say it. And I did. I walked in that room and my dad was griping, and I finally told him, I said, Daddy, I said, you're going to be dying pretty soon. They told him he had about a week to live. And I said, you're going to go one or two places. You're going to go to heaven or you're going to go burn in hell. And I said, where is it that you want to go? And he got very quiet. I said, your anger that you left in your life, the unforgiveness that you have for mom, you're allowing that to take you to a place you don't want to go. And so that's where I left it. I walked out of the room. And so he pondered on that for a couple of days, called me back in his room, and he says, I just want you to know that me and God, we're cool. I said, oh, yeah? And he said, yes. He goes, I said, did you forgive mom? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I forgave your mom, and I just want you to know that me and God, we're cool, and I asked for forgiveness. So to me, that was one of the biggest things, not only just taking care of my dad and making sure that he was taken care of in the right way, it was salvation. So sometimes God puts us in places that we don't necessarily feel that are comfortable, but it's a place you may need to be, you know. And then now I'm with my father-in-law, and he's very challenging as far as medical-wise and mobility, things like that. He's been very challenging, but he is the most loving man and has the best personality. And through this instance, I've just really learned to pray. I pray about it. I don't get upset. I try to just think of, like, if I was in the same position and how would I want to be treated. And a lot of times it's, for the elderly, it's loneliness. So one of the biggest challenges for me is having to put everything in my household aside. So if you come to my house and I have dishes in my sink, don't be judging me. No. No, really. I mean, it is challenging trying to take care of him, take care of the house, take care of the yard, and just prior priorities in my life. Before my father-in-law came, we had started this Harbors for Hope, taking care of the homeless. So trying to balance that, and then also trying to balance getting to go see my grandchildren play softball. Sometimes I have to juggle who I see that week. If I seen one this week and I didn't get to see the other two, then I have to kind of rotate around who you get to go see. So sometimes that's challenging, where I've always been there before for every single game, every dance, everything. You know, you try to be there for everything your grandchildren do, and be a part of their life. So it's just a process of having to prioritize what you have to do that very day. And pray.
Well, that's great advice. I think on that note, we'll go ahead and conclude. We had some more, but we could be here all day just kind of picking their brain and getting this great encouragement. I was thinking, we're going to have prayer for all the moms, and so I want to remind you, there's a little gift for you on the back table, ladies, if you want to grab that on your way out. And I was thinking about the special role that women have played in Scripture. I've heard some really unkind things said from pulpits. I heard a couple of old-time preachers talking about Esther, and the way they were talking about her, it was like, that's rough, man. And just that old mindset about women need to know their place, you know. that old mindset that just, but if you're around Jesus, you saw him elevate the place of women. The first eyewitnesses of the resurrection were women. Some of his closest followers were women. And obviously, his main disciples were men. That would have been the way it would needed to have been in that culture, and it probably should be that way most of the time. You always have to be careful, in those types of situations. But and I was even thinking, even Solomon, he had some interesting words of instruction for women. But look at it this way: Proverbs 31 is the Proverbs 31 woman. Have you ever seen that? You ever read that? Just this amazing, Solomon does a great job of explaining, what the Proverbs 31 woman, this woman of excellence, and this beautiful woman, this amazing woman, that's talented, so committed. And so that's Proverbs 31. The other 30 chapters of Proverbs is Solomon trying to get the men to get their lives straightened out. So you got one for the women, which is tribute, and the other 30 is, guys, get your life together. And so in closing our service today, we'd like to have all of our women stand. We'll just have you stand right where you are. Back in the day, we'd have everybody come to the front. I wouldn't mind doing that because we'd get a picture, but I've been told us cool churches don't do that anymore. But the reason we like to have all of our moms stand is, first of all, guys, let's give them a round of applause for... The biggest source of stress for the ladies here today is that guy sitting next to them. And but today we want to honor our moms, and so we want to conclude our service by having a prayer for you ladies wherever.